This is Colorful Radio. Our music, our news, our views.
So welcome to the second hour of Self-Centred with me, Lisa Ben. I'm here till 1 p.m, so make sure you don't go anywhere. The two tracks you just heard were New Day by Alicia Keys and Beautiful Day by Mary J. Blige. And you know, in that track, there's this really, really nice line that I like. And she says, though it's cloudy, I can see the sun rays. And I think for people who are suffering from depression, who feel like they're in a black cloud or have a black cloud on them permanently, I think when you can get to the point where you can see the sun rays, that's your hope, and that will help you pull you out of your depression. So that line really struck me. Now, as I've just said, depression is the topic today, as it's Depression Awareness Week tomorrow, and it's a time where awareness is raised to shed light on this growing issue. As usual, I'll be joined by Rasheed Ogunlaru very, very shortly. He's just entered the building, and at 12:20 I'll be speaking to Rachel Kelly, who is a journalist, author and ambassador for Mental Health Charity SANE, and she'll be sharing her experiences with depression, so make sure you do not go anywhere. There isn't a real question today, but there kind of is in the same breath. It's how are you? How are you? Because, you know, we ask this question to other people all the time. Hey, how are you? How are you feeling? What's going on? But how often do we ask ourselves that question? So today it's about asking yourself, how are you? Once you can really be truthful with yourself, you may get to the place where you need to say, okay, do I need to go and find help? Do I need to go and speak to a friend? Do I need to go to my GP? Just asking yourself, how are you, and being honest could actually lead you to a different and better place. So stay with me. That's the question all morning. If you do want to share your experiences, you can tweet at Colourful Radio and directly to me at @IAM_Lisa Bent. You can call me on 0203 475 6878, or you can email me via the Colourful Radio website. If we do not talk, then you won't know. So although depression may appear to be or feel like a scary word for many, many people, it's something we really do need to discuss, because the growing numbers of depression is increasing. So let's get talking. Let's just break through that barrier and let you get to the place that you need to get to. All right. So let's take a long walk with Jill Scott. For those of you who are suffering from depression, it may feel like a very long walk right now, but I assure you, you will come out of it and you will get to that nice green patch of grass that's waiting for you with a nice picnic. Enjoy.
This is Colorful Radio. Our music, our news, our views.
So that was A Long Walk by Jill Scott, and I'm now joined by Rasheed Ogunlaru, the life coach. Good morning.
Hey, the life coach is in the building. How are you doing?
I'm all right, you know. Yeah, the sun's shining. I have nothing to complain about. It's a very interesting subject. And I know that many people at home are actually currently listening to this at the moment and collecting their thoughts about it.
Yeah, I was really pleased. I was on my way in. I saw lots of people kind of retweeting and so on. And it is a really interesting topic, this topic today around depression. So I'm so glad that you chose it, because it's one of those, again, it's probably one of those slightly taboo topics. Yeah. And it's one of those topics that on the one hand, it's something that we're very mindful. Sometimes people might say, oh, I'm a bit depressed today, on the one hand, so we use it as a bit of a throwaway, as a catch-all for when people are low. But on the other hand, when it becomes to more seriously, that you hear somebody's got depression, often that we're afraid or we block it out or what have you. So I'm so glad, Lisa, that you're inviting people to talk about it, because that talking about it is so key. So I'm really looking forward to today's talk.
Brilliant. And the question today is, how are you? In the sense that I'm asking people to ask themselves that, because we ask people how they are all the time, but how often do we ask ourselves, how are you? Right. So rather than saying to you, what or who do you appreciate today, I'm just going to ask you to ask yourself, how are you? And tell me what comes up for you.
Well, what I could tell you, I'm just really glad to be here. For me, what's really important to a good state of mind and state of being is a real appreciation, a real gratitude. So I'm just really grateful for just being here, that I have a level of health. I don't know what my level of my health is going to be tomorrow or the next day, and I'm very, very grateful. And I'm very grateful. I'm very aware of where I am at my stage of life and so on, and being very aware of that. So for me, it brings up lots of things, that thing about how are you, to check in with oneself. And I'm so glad that you said that, because, and I'd say one tip, just even as we start, to say to listeners, with this whole topic, do ask people, how are you? And then sometimes, even if you get that greeting back, ask them actually, how genuinely are you? How are you actually feeling? Especially when you know that person and you do notice that they seem down or a bit withdrawn or what have you, because it's very magical. It can be that fact that the connectivity is so important with regard to this. And there are some simple things that you can do. And we know that talking, sharing, feeling connected is very, very, very powerful.
Fully agree. Okay, so as the regular listeners know, we are still trying to find a theme tune for you. For those who have just joined, welcome. You're listening to Self-Centered with me, Lisa Ben. I'm now joined by Rasheed Ogunlaru, the life coach. He's with me at 11 o'clock every single week. At the start of my show at 10 o'clock, I play Golden by Jill Scott. That is Self Central's theme tune. And at the moment, we're still trying to find the right theme tune for Rasheed, and we haven't really got there just yet.
But I'm enjoying the tour. So enjoying the tour of all these particular songs, isn't it? All these uplifting songs. So again, if people have got suggestions, do keep tweeting away and so on. So I'm so looking forward to, again, the one that you picked up, because again, I don't know what.
Well, today it's called "You Come First" by Jacob Latimore. Okay. So let's see what this is all about.
Great.
Understand, girl, as long as I'm your man, you gon' always come first. Show you I ain't playing, baby, listen what I'm saying, you gon' always come.
This is Colorful Radio. Our music, our news.
Do we put ourselves first? And I think when it comes to our well-being, and especially our mental well-being, it's key that we put ourselves first, because what can happen is that we've got whatever responsibilities or the rat race of life. I was just even thinking about that term, Lisa, the human race. And I think that's part of the problem, because often we're racing and so on. And in a race, people are often overheating. And then my simple take on it is sometimes what happens is that the mind overheats, and that we're constantly, if you think about it, the human condition is one that we're always constantly thinking about what we need to do next, what we need to do later on today, things that are really important for us, the kids, the friends, the families, the parents, or where we are in our life, what isn't happening, the money worries, the practical worries, the neighbours, and so on. And I think this means that often our minds are often overheated. So be it that people have got very pressurised jobs, or be it that people have had very challenging lives or backgrounds, there's often all of this noise, as I'd put it, and that would then that creates all sorts of pressure. And if you think about the word depression, for example, in the weather kind of terms, a depression is like the one there's a build up that kind of heavy pressure and so on, and it pushes everything down. You're like, sometimes and then you've got those thundery thingy that you can feel it. So now I think on a human being level, that sometimes there's all that stuff kind of pushing down on you. Sometimes on a everyday level that most of us will experience, that somebody might say, oh, they're feeling a bit low, or they're not that great at the moment. But sometimes it becomes more pronounced, or it's far more constant that person is in that particular space. So I think the first thing is putting yourself first and being aware of where you're at is really, really important. And simple things like, are you getting enough rest? Is your rest being disturbed? Do you feel as though you're sleeping well, eating well adjusted? Is a really good sign of how you are in your own health and well-being, and in your mental health and well-being. So I think that, like everything else, it needs to be tended and being aware of how you're feeling. And if things don't feel right, then that's the first sign that perhaps you might want to explore or take a look at that.
And that's why the question, how are you, is a really, really important question to ask. And it can lead you to anywhere. But the key thing is not to be scared of where it's going to lead you to. Because if you need to sort something out, then you have to actually ask yourself that question.
And absolutely. And I think you're so on point, as always, but with that question, asking it today, because what happens in our society is when we do ask it, we don't genuinely want a reply. We want somebody to say, oh, I'm fine, and therefore that you're basically, I'm fine, if you think about it, is the response that you expect. If somebody says that they're not fine, then all of a sudden there is an issue, but we don't often want to talk about it. So I think we need to realize that I'm fine it may well sometimes be truths, but is that the case? So sometimes, and you see it a lot of the time, people feel as though that they're not fine, but they say that they're fine, and you can sense in it that all this other stuff is welling up in them. So I think in a society, we're not that great at talking about these more challenging issues about our mental health. We do, and we were talking about this just off the thingy. We are when it comes to our physical health, what we're eating and so on.
Yeah.
But when it comes to mental health, we don't quite know how to go about it. Partly because we don't know that much about the mind anyway.
Is that again proves why awareness is so important. So if you are eating the wrong foods, you see that manifesting in your weight increasing. So if you eat a lot of junk food, your weight will expand. You might even get some spots because your body is saying, like, I can't tolerate this very much, and it might come out in your spots. You might get bigger. But how do you know how your mental health is? And I think just thinking back, I think a really good example or a good awareness to have is how is your behaviour? Because I think that tells you how you are. So if you've become irritable, no patience, the outbursts are like from 0 to 100 in practically no time. And if that is out of your character, then your behaviour towards others is actually a sign that maybe you're not as okay as what you think you are.
And I think you're right, that can go in that way, in that scale. And then there's the other scale, isn't it, where perhaps you're feeling more and more withdrawn, and where some people who are getting very, let's say, depressed, often that they will really withdraw. I know a very good friend of mine who's a wonderful person who I sent a note about this particular show, and he shared with me a while ago. We hadn't caught up for a long time, and he was saying that he's got depression, and he was saying that he doesn't lots of times he just doesn't want to get out of bed. So again, if you're recognizing those kind of symptoms where you're just feeling more and more withdrawn, and that you're more and more lethargic, or you have less and less interest in anything, and that you've got less and less energy, you're finding it really difficult and you can't face people, that's also another sign. But in terms of the earlier signs, it's really important to talk to people, go and see your GP, look online, there's so much information. And then you mentioned organisations like SANE, Samaritans, who I volunteered for a long period of time, where sometimes you just need to be able to talk to people without people feeling that is necessarily a problem.
And the thing is, the more you talk or the more you go onto the internet, you'll find that you're actually not alone. And when we come back after this, we'll extend on that a little bit more, okay? This track is called Pieces of Me by Ledisi.
People just don't know what I'm about. They haven't seen what's there behind my smile. There's so much more of me I'm showing now. These are the pieces of me. When it looks like I'm up, sometimes I'm down. I'm alone even with people all around. But that don't change the happiness I found. These are the pieces of me.
If you just joined in, welcome to Self Centered with me, Lisa Ben. I'm now joined by Rasheed Ogunlaru, the life coach, and we are speaking about depression. Rasheed, you mentioned that a guy recently shared with you his experience of depression.
Yeah.
And today's question is, how are you? And that's for you to ask yourself. Now, the answer that I can share with you is today I am fine. I feel really, really good. But there are times where I haven't felt fine. Last year, none of you guys would know this. I guess you probably hear this show all the time. You think, oh, yeah, she's a counsellor. She's fine. Her life is perfect. No. Last year for me was probably one of the hardest years of my whole entire life to date, and I'm 35. So I can now sit here and say I have suffered from depression. I'm only now kind of clawing out of it because I can actually now see the light. And as Stephen Fry said in that tweet that I sent earlier, which is part of today's Daily Nudge, the reason why, I can't actually tell you the reason why, because I am actually a happy person. I'm bubbly. I am actually happy with my life. But I think something occurred in my work life which kind of threw me off kilter. And then I began to question everything that I thought I believed. And that's why in the first hour, I mentioned something called existential crisis, which, if you missed it, it basically means a moment at which an individual questions the very foundations of their life, whether their life has any meaning, purpose or value. At that point with my work, I worked really hard. They said I was valued, but I didn't feel valued. So the two things contradicted itself. And so I had this internal battle going on within me. I didn't know what was anything anymore. I just didn't feel like anything was, or I wasn't being told the truth. And so the way I dealt with it is that I quit. I came out of that situation, and now I'm slowly doing the things that I want to do, and I feel loved. But for me, what does depression feel like? Okay, so it feels like a black cloud is over you constantly. It could be sunny outside, people could be laughing, you can hear the birds chirping, but it's like this image of a black cloud over you. Some days it rains, sometimes it doesn't, but it's that you wake up. Well, I woke up and I had the instant feeling of dread, and I'm like, what is this? I'm not stressing about anything, so what is this dread about? And in terms of my behavior, I became withdrawn. I didn't really go out, I didn't really see friends, I didn't speak to anyone, I didn't want to speak to anyone, I didn't want anyone to ask me any questions, because I actually couldn't give you the answer. And when I did meet up with people, all I'd do was just burst into tears. And then it's like, well, what are you crying about? And I'm like, I don't know what I'm crying about.
I think that's really so powerful that you shared. And I think that, Lisa, I think that so many people will resonate with that. And I think that sometimes, a bit like as you described, maybe somebody's got their life in which there's just all this stuff. There's the pressure, let's think about that, that's depression. The pressure, they've got such busy lives. They're busy working in whatever. And that could be like you're just busy with all these responsibilities of family, or being a carer, or the breadwinner, or trying to be the breadwinner, or in a high powered job. It doesn't matter. It could be that you've got, you're just at home, or thinking all sorts of different situations with that pressures on it. And then also, as you said, that sometimes it can be this existential crisis that you're wondering, who am I? Does my life have any value? I coach quite a lot of people who have that kind of scenario. What's it about? And I think that the key thing is, I'd say that sometimes these moments are actually very useful and beautiful moments, because we actually ask ourselves, actually, what do I really want to do? What am I really about? Do I really want to be doing these things? Do I really want to be doing what I do for a living? Or in that case, you quit something that you're not meant to be doing to try and find something that's more nourishing for you. Or sometimes for us to just realize, I just need to slow down because I'm putting myself under so much pressure. You see lots of people at all walks of life, including lots of celebrities and so on. Sometimes there will be other kind of factors, sometimes at certain times a bit more kind of chemical factors, and it might relate to what kind of stuff we're taking on board that may well not work with us. I'm not an expert on that particular level. There can be all sorts of different things. I think it's important that you become aware of it. You begin then to be, hopefully you start talking to people about it. And then sometimes, as with you did, you began to identify, and sometimes we actually know ourselves, what are some of the things that actually nourish me and that are really important. And so I want to flag up already that the importance of certain things like rest, sleep, food, water, hydration. Also, sometimes I'm a big fan of this, and I talk about it all the time, but getting outside. Often in lives, we spend so much time pacing around in our minds that we don't get outside. And often we're not getting the vitamin E, or the sunshine that we need, the space, the fresh air, and we're not there nourished and replenished by nature. We might be sat down all day, cooped up all day, so we're not connecting to ourselves and nature and all of that kind of stuff. And often that, for us to be able to express, you're talking before, I think, when we were chatting about somebody who, I think the guest later, might be poetry, writing down how you feel, arts, drawing. It's interesting. I've been doing quite a lot of work recently for the NHS around mental health, working with professionals and with service users. And actually, the degree to which some of these things, I was doing things from meditation, relaxation exercises with people, getting them to draw and crafts and so on. Some of these things are very, very powerful, because they're things that will take us away from our mind and all the noise in our mind through to pure creative expression or connection or being still and so on, through something like meditation, relaxation, which can have a very, 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 very big impact. So, but also there's something about, you're not, just because somebody happens to be living with these things, often that somebody can be highly functioning too, but sometimes there are just these extremes.
Oh God, I was highly functioning, and obviously because I'm a counsellor, I know myself, I just know. When I did eventually speak to a few friends who are really, really supportive, they actually said to me, oh my God, I've been feeling the same thing. So you're actually not alone. And I actually think the ratio of the amount of people who are suffering from depression is a lot higher than what the statistics actually say. I just think as well, because depression for many is a big scary word, and it has this big stigma around it. I think people may not actually say, yeah, I have depression. If you used to say, sometimes do you have high days and low days? Do you sometimes break into tears? Sometimes do you just want to be left alone? Sometimes people will say yes. And that is a sign, it's a symptom of depression. But the actual label of depression is when you have, I think, about 7 to 9 core symptoms. That's when you have depression.
Right. And do you think, and I wonder, with that, and given all your experience also as a counsellor, do you feel that the word depression sometimes is a problem? Because I often think, or rather, the label, and as soon as somebody then realises that they will be labelled, so the word is a heavy word, no pun intended, and then when to be labelled with it seems to make things very stuck, and that label is stuck on us.
Yes.
So, and whereas I loved your description. So tell me, what's your feeling? Is even the term depression sometimes unhelpful, and what do you feel is useful for people in that situation as a professional?
Do you know what? I think depression sounds depressing, and I think it correctly describes the feeling of depression. So when I was going through this and I was writing my journal and stuff, the term that I use and the term that you'll see, if you was ever to read my journal, is broken rainbow. I feel like a broken rainbow. So I'm colourful. I've got all these talents, all these skills. I can, I'm a very positive person with a positive outlook. And at the moment, in this stage of my life, I feel like part of that rainbow is slightly fragmented. It's cracked a little bit, which means I'm slightly broken. I'm a broken rainbow. I prefer that definition as opposed to my description of depression, which is like that black cloud over you. I don't like that. It's still quite suppressive and it's suffocating. Whereas if I say I'm a broken rainbow, it means that at the moment things aren't going too well, but I can see the light at the end of the tunnel, and I know I will get through, and I will heal through that to become that bright rainbow once again. And it's very interesting because Rachel Kelly, who I'll be interviewing in the last hour, her book is called Black Rainbow. So it's really interesting with how we kind of see ourselves and how we choose to describe depression. Hugely.
And I know that one of the records that you really love and you play sometimes is this Mariah Carey record, Through the Rain. I've always been a strong believer in the power of that. We often don't realise that lots of those very difficult, the lows of life, can be absolutely transformational. I'm a strong advocate of that sometimes through going through stuff like that, one becomes far more emotionally attuned to oneself and others. And it's because we've often ignored or negated those sides of how we actually feel and so on, that we haven't gone there. So I think it's important that we don't run away from these things, that we can often, by understanding that, we really deeply understand ourselves, others, and can really connect very, very deeply often from that. So, yeah.
And I honestly think it is just part of life. You're going to have your ups, you're going to have your downs, and I think it's how you deal with it. If you are in denial of how you're feeling, whatever you resist will persist, and it may put you in a deeper depressive state. Whereas if you just acknowledge that, today is not a very good day, what do I need to do to maybe cheer myself up? Or you can just choose to just stay with how you're feeling. I think as long as you are honest with where you are at, you will come through it. It's when you are choosing to be totally oblivious to it or be in denial of it that it becomes really, really difficult.
One question I want to ask, maybe and after the next record, but particularly as you're again a professional in this, Lisa, I wonder, do you think that lots of people don't seek help because they're afraid that it's going to be a spiral downward? That they might find themselves in therapy, or they might find themselves, slipping down, and that they're not quite sure how to. And I just wonder, because you are somebody who's experienced in that field, what advice would you give to somebody who's just worried that if they do speak about it, if they do share it with their partner or with a friend, or go to the doctor and say that they've got this, they're worried, they don't know what path that's going to take them down. So I wonder if you might share a little from your experience about what about that, because people might be just worried about, well, where do I go, and does it mean that I'm losing my mind? That's what lots of people feel.
You will not lose your mind. It's counselling, especially, is one of the most supportive things that you could give to yourself. It's an investment to yourself. Counsellors are trained to be non-judgmental. So if you're worried about talking to a family member, then go to your GP and ask to be put on the list to go and see a counsellor. If you are able to afford to go private, just go. There's so many things in life that are the unknown, and you're not going to know until you go. So just get that courage, and just by having the courage to go and say, I actually need help, means that you are willing and you're ready to work through this situation.
And you're already on that journey, aren't you? You're classically already on that journey. And you're already
on that journey. And I see every counsellor has to be trained to become a counsellor, which basically means we need to go to a counsellor. And not as a counsellor, but as an individual who's had to go to counselling, I can tell you it was the best experience of my life. Yes, things come up, but you will realise that your sense of self is strengthened, and that you actually can work through any issue.
And that's also a good moment, isn't it, to talk about that there are so many support services. There are organisations like SANE. There are places like Samaritans that are completely free. You can ring up, you can call up, or you can go and visit and sometimes talk to somebody. And there's the power of speaking to people. And of all speaking therapies, counselling, coaching, psychotherapy and so on is profound, or just talking to a really, really good friend. And and the good thing about this is that sometimes actually you don't or you can't talk to family or whatever, they've got an investment. So the power of speaking to somebody who's skilled, who can really help and support you is really powerful. But there's a lot of support out there, and some are probably just mutually supportive groups, and sometimes being active. Sometimes I think isolation is also part of it. So for some people being able to go out there, or there might be a group and they might do things, or gardening or talking or whatever, all sorts of different things, that can be really nourishing and healing in of itself.
Exactly. So even if you didn't want to do a one-to-one thing, seek out organisations where they have supportive therapeutic groups. So like you've got the AA. So it's other people who are, have problems with alcohol who go together and they discuss them. There's so many people who do this. So if you don't want to do a one-to-one thing, go and seek out those organisations where you can be in the room and hear other people's stories. And I assure you, you are not alone. I need to stress that. I just really need to stress it. Depression makes you feel like you're alone and that you're the only one experiencing it. Please, I can assure you, you are not.
Well, for me, one of the themes in all these self-central talks and all these sessions, I really strongly verge, a highlight that really do try and develop really strong connections. Spot those people who really care about you, because they will really welcome when you share with them, and it will often deepen and enrichen that relationship. And as you said, other people might say, actually, I know this, or I know there's somebody else who's gone through the thing, or that they've been through it themselves, and it can change things so much for the better.
Exactly. And while we're there, I just want to stress again, for if you are the friend that the person is coming to, please do not ask why. Not use the words needs, should or must. Do not do it. Just listen. And again, while we're here, before we close, let me just read the today's Daily Nudge, which is from Stephen Fry. He said, if you know someone who's depressed, please resolve never to ask them why. Depression isn't a straightforward response to a bad situation. Depression just is, like the weather. Try to understand the blackness, lethargy, hopelessness and loneliness they are going through. Be there for them when they come through the other side. It's hard to be a friend to someone who's depressed, but it is one of the kindest, noblest and best things you will ever do. And that is just so true. It really, really is. And I think as well, for my friends who know that I suffer from depression, I actually do think they feel hopeless, because there's nothing they can do. Literally, there's nothing you can do. And I think that's really hard for maybe friends and family to actually understand. There is nothing they can do. However, just hearing and listening to me in a non-judgmental way does so much. So you are actually helping.
It does. And I think the other thing I would say for those people who are listening to this and they're touched by it, and perhaps they've been lucky that they've had, or currently in a good space, this is a good time to be thinking about other things that you could be doing. There's so many organisations out there, and I speak as a former Samaritan volunteer, who'd so welcome people who are prepared to volunteer some time, to be there as a supporter, as a listener and a volunteer. And there's so many different groups out there, and that can be a way that sometimes giving back, that's going to also improve your state of mind and health and well-being yourself, because there's something about giving, and I think that you might be listening to the show and that's, you're more in a place whereby you're wanting to do something, or you feel as though there's something missing, and sometimes giving, volunteering, being supportive, being there with a neighbour who might be alone and going in there for coffee or tea or whatever. It might be that you want to go through a formal route or informal route. It can be just very, very powerful. Take some time with somebody, or to mentor a family member. It will transform you. It's certainly transformed mine. And I'll share that. Whilst I haven't suffered from depression, what have you, I certainly know that when I was ego, me, pursuing music, when I volunteered and when I became a Samaritan volunteer, supporting lots of people with mental health challenges and all sorts of challenges, it was one of the things that was the making of me. It was one of the things that taught me so much. It gave me so much. And doing the work that I do now and supporting lots of people going through challenges, I can't tell you how amazing it is when you're able to support somebody. It gives you so much. People listen to this and they think I'm saying some wise or interesting things. That's because of my exposure to having met people at all stages of life. So I'm so grateful for all the ups and downs of life. And I think that, as Stephen Fry said, I'm so glad he echoes my words about the weather. It is just all weather. All the states of mind, it's just all weather. There's highs and there's lows. And the more you can accept them, also that's going to help you. So I think if you do live with depression or ups and downs, or however you describe it, I think the key thing is get to know your own weather patterns, the seasons, what works when it is that times that you might need to just go in for shelter, and the times when you need to get out and about and enjoy the sunshine in between, and the things that you enjoy doing. And I think that there's some things that can be very healing. It might be cooking, it might be gardening, it might be talking to friends, it might be exercise. There's so many different things, whatever works for you. And with the work I've just been doing recently, it's been amazing how amazing people who are labelled as that they've got this or particular mental health, how I'm amazed by how remarkable on so many levels they are. And it doesn't necessarily mean somebody looks down either. Some people can look happy and they can have that. So I'm so glad we've talked about this topic today.
So am I, and thank you for sharing your expressions as usual. They're always spot on. And we're going to see you the same time, the same place next week. Guys at home, do not go anywhere, because in the next hour I'll be speaking to Rachel Kelly, who is a journalist, author and ambassador for Mental Health Charity SANE, and she'll be revealing her own experiences regarding Do Not Go Anywhere. I'm going to leave you with Better to Talk It Out by Gerald Levert, because I think it's fitting. And I'll see you shortly.